Welcome everyone to ECPG Live, Getting Off an Emotional Roller Coaster. I am Tana Russell, Assistant Director with the Evergreen Council on Problem Gambling, welcoming you here today. If you didn't know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so this episode is in honor of that. We will be talking about coping skills, tips and tricks and tools and insight and resource sharing and all kinds of good stuff today. I do want to give a little disclaimer first before we bring on our guests. Our guests are licensed clinicians and therapists. However, this episode is not confidential. This is live. This is on Facebook and YouTube. So protect your privacy and other people's privacy. We want this to be insightful and engaging and encouraging. Our therapists, our guests here today, are not giving any kind of specific clinical or counseling advice. So we just want to remind you of that, and so that you can fully enjoy and engage comfortably. With that, let's bring in our guests. And as we get our discussion started, please feel free to leave comments in the chat. We do have viewers tuning in from Facebook and YouTube. So you may see your comment or question pulled onto the screen to be integrated into our discussion today. And as always, we have Rob Maya behind the scenes with us, and a blog which already has some resources on it for you. If there's more that come up in this discussion, we will add them later. So with that, welcome to Janai and Brad. These individuals are in our own great state of Washington, multiple licenses here. So they're licensed to treat mental health and substance use and gambling. We'll talk about how all of these things kind of go together a little bit today. And let's just start at the top of the screen with Janai. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. My name is Janai Caraway, and I run a private practice focusing on co-occurring and problem gambling, licensed in community mental health, substance use disorder, and Washington State certified gambling at the level 2. So I work with families, individuals. I also provide consultation and training to facilities and agencies wanting to improve their practice modalities, and also offer supervision to students who are in the process of obtaining licensure or need post-licensure supervision. Excited to be here.
Thank you very much for making the time to join us today. I've been excited to have you on this episode. I appreciate it.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
And Brad, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Brad Galvin. I'm a mental health counselor, substance use counselor, and I'm a gambling counselor supervisor. I'm in downtown Seattle. And yeah, one of the things that I've really enjoyed is I've created a trauma-informed gambling program that has a few different curricula. So it has a treatment curriculum, a family curriculum, and a psychoeducation curriculum. Because I know when I got into the field about 10 years ago, it was really hard to find stuff. So I've really been enjoying spending my time both as a supervisor and doing clinical work, and then as well doing some consulting and creating this program. And I've had a lot of people helping me along the way in creating it. So yeah, and it's great to be here. It's great to get to share, and thanks so much for inviting me.
Excellent, excellent. Glad to have you. So let's get our discussion started. So this past year plus, right, has been kind of an emotional roller coaster for everyone, with all kinds of things going on, not just the pandemic, but a bunch of stuff that have been thrown at us lately. And so let's just start with that. Like, what do you do if you feel like your life is stuck on an emotional roller coaster, ups and downs and being thrown this way or that? Do you guys have anything that comes to mind that is a way to cope, to get through these?
Well, Janai and I actually, when we chatted yesterday, we both agreed that the self-care medicine wheel which is a way of looking at our lives through different dimensions, can be a really good way to identify areas where our self-care could improve. And what I mean by that is you look, say, at your physical life, and it might be, okay, I need to balance out my sleep and my exercise, my diet. It may also be, cultural. I know for me, the social cultural piece has been what's really been most painful for me. And looking at that saying, oh, why am I in this kind of strange mood? Well, it's because I can't just go hang out with my friends. I can't do the things. I can't go and just be the person really that I was. And so that's another area of the medicine wheel. But I think just really honing in on self-care, knowing that our capacity for living our full lives might be capped at a certain percentage, might be capped at 70 or 80% because of some of the issues we've been having with COVID. So I always lean into the self-care. And so, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, Brad. Thank you for bringing that up. Really being able to just stop and observe what's going on in your life can be really helpful. And, in the treatment world, we use an analogy called sober, which is stop. And sometimes that means physically stop what you're doing and observe what's going on around. And just kind of doing some mindful breathing and also giving yourself the permission to experience what's happening. So that's the E of it. And then the R is respond. What can you do about being on this emotional roller coaster? And really recognizing that with this added stress of COVID and really life changing as we've known it, it really is important and can be so beneficial to look at how the medicine wheel is in balance, in what ways, and then giving yourself some celebration and praise that you do have the ability to get in there and rebalance.
Absolutely. Rob, if you want to pull in a comment from Dave. Hi, Dave. I'll give you guys a little teaser. Dave is going to be coming on a future podcast episode here soon. So keep an eye out for that. He says a mindful moment can be a day changer. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? The power of mindfulness. I know that's kind of a buzzword a little bit these days, mindfulness, but there's really some power to it. Do you guys, either of you want to touch on that a little?
Sure. I think for me, meditation, and I kind of use those terms interchangeably, but meditation is something that I offer to all my clients. And so much of it, it's just simply connecting, like what Dave bringing up this mindful moment, and Janai just noticing what's happening, just slowing down. There's so many ways. I mean, we have the whole world is available to us in our pocket through our cell phone. So it's just, this can be so easy to just be constantly distracted. And so this idea of just pausing for even 1 minute, I'd read somewhere this monk was sharing about stopping for 1 minute every hour and just observing your breath. I tried that for a day, and I think I did it like 4 times. So it's much easier said than done, but that can be hugely healing. It's like, I think of the snow globes, and you shake them up. And we spend so much time shaking our kind of mental snow globe that the snow never really settles. But giving it an opportunity to settle, there is peace underneath. It just can seem like we've been, kind of shaking for so long that we can disconnect from that. So I love that. That's a great recommendation.
Yeah, I just support that as well. I think that for myself, looking at mindfulness meditation, it's really a way to connect even with spirit and culture, kind of recognizing that if we can be in the here and now, it can, again, I love that snow globe analogy because it kind of can calm things down. And especially, again, related to COVID, not to bring that up too much, but I think that so many people right now are living in this kind of fight or flight mode where they're not giving themselves permission just to slow down and be in the moment. So I too have tried that challenge of 1 minute every hour and haven't gotten very far. So thank you, Brad, for bringing that up because it reminds me that even I can use that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take this as a challenge in my own life and start doing that a little bit more. So
Yeah,
beneficial.
I think
That's
one
great.
thing that comes to mind for me is emotional decision making, right? So when you're stuck in a state of we'll say strong emotion, be it anxiety, worry, fear, depression, etc., taking a moment to just breathe, be mindful, calm down, let things sit for a little bit before making any at least major decisions or financial decisions can also maybe save you or spare you some regrets, which only just add to the worry later. And oft it's not a bad thing to have those emotions, but if the emotion is controlling what we do, what we buy, and what comes out of our mouth, that often can end up causing more problems for us later that we're then trying to pick up the pieces for. Or maybe I'm just speaking for myself there. I don't know, but
That email that you write all the details and just say, okay, you know what? It's okay. I can send this tomorrow morning and take a look at it. And oh, yeah, the grief that we can save ourselves. But it's so tempting when we're feeling all of it, to just
Mhm.
react.
That's right. Slow down. Feel your emotions. Don't let your emotions control you. Yeah. So some people may have heard some clinical terminology such as cognitive coping or emotion regulation or self-regulation, and these sounds great. But what exactly does that mean? Like, what does that look like in a day-to-day life, really?
Well, I think that when we look at cognitive coping and emotional regulation, if we kind of just take all the clinical bookwork out of it, it's really about how to balance your feelings and emotions. Looking at what is your thinking process connected to your emotions and then ultimately your behavior and reactions. And being able to have a conversation with yourself and even somebody in your life as a support person to identify when you may be dysregulated, or maybe in one's life where it's not so clinical. Dysregulated could be just having a bad day, and bad days are okay. It's okay to have them, but looking at how can you turn that bad day and kind of thought flip it into something that's positive, where you're feeling more motivated and engaged in your life.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is there's so much that we can do with our thoughts. And while EMDR and which is primarily what I do, which is more kind of a body based approach, um, where you're healing past trauma or working through addictive habits and that, it's still so important working with our thoughts, being, having gratitude and doing some of these things that might even seem a little cheesy when we think about it, but really giving ourselves that love and nurturing and affirmations and those type of things, because we need, especially as adults, who we really need support from is ourselves. And so when we notice, one of the terms I use a lot too is this idea of staying within our windows of tolerance, right? Like, what is my window of tolerance? And so when we're processing trauma in session, I'm thinking in that way, but also in day-to-day life, it's important to notice, like what Tana was saying earlier, having that feeling of overwhelm, wanting to react, and then noticing, oh, if this is my window of tolerance, I'm now way over here. Okay, this is not the best place for me to be making decisions, to be interacting with people. I need to first get my emotions a little bit more under control, work with my mind, maybe get some exercise to calm myself. And then, oh, good, I'm back within my window of tolerance. Now I'm coming from my healthy adult self and maybe not my triggered, like, younger part of myself that's just maybe my 12 or 13-year-old who's just like rebellious and angry, or my little kid who's super scared, but coming from my adult self. So I think that's when I think of cognitive coping and emotion regulation. It's like, okay, what's going on for me right now? And that importance of being mindful and checking in is where it starts.
Yeah, I feel like as humans, we can learn ways to change our thinking to something that's more of a healthy mindset to be in, right? Just because you have a negative thought doesn't make it true and doesn't make it the thing that you're going to act on. I can have a more healthy outlook on things. I can learn how to calm myself down, lower my blood pressure. Personally, I'm a dog lover, I'm a dog owner. I feel like my dog does this so naturally, right? She can self-regulate with the best of them, man. She'll just go grab her toy or go find her favorite place to lay down. You know, I feel like we can learn a little bit from our pets in this. Like, they take care of their needs. They take care of their emotional health, right? We can too.
I love that. That's great.
That's great. Yeah.
All right, let's see. If you kind of find yourself being dragged into an emotional roller coaster, right? If there's a relationship involvement element to this, and if it were just me living by myself, fine, but I live with, X number of people and children and spouses and family and all of these people in my life. Any ideas for integrating the relationship element of this, right? When you feel like you're good until someone walks in the room or opens their mouth, and now I feel like I'm dragged into another emotional swing again. Here we go. What are some ideas that come to mind for you guys there?
I think just noticing what's happening. And again, all of these answers are ultimately going to come back to mindfulness. And thanks again, Dave, for bringing that up. But, that's really what it comes down to is, okay, first of all, noticing where am I? Where am I in my window of tolerance? Knowing that family, people that are close to us, can often trigger some of our own unresolved stuff and our own challenges emotionally that maybe in the longer term we need to work through. I know what can be really difficult is there may be certain people who really aren't healthy for us in our lives. And when we check in with ourselves, we might get a clear message of my body is telling me this person is not right for me, whether it's a romantic partner, potential romantic partner, or whether it's a friend. And what can be hardest, and I've experienced this in my personal life as well, is saying, okay, this is actually what's happening for me, because my mind, for a number of reasons, tends to want to come in and say, well, they're not that bad, or well, and the temptation, because of fear of loss, fear of maybe even a little fear of abandonment, that can come up. It might be, okay, I don't want to lose this person, so I'm going to hold on to something that maybe really isn't good for me, and my body and my emotions are telling me that, but I don't want to get off of this roller coaster because maybe it's kind of exciting. Maybe there are some pieces that I'm not even aware of that relate to what I learned growing up about how relationships are. And so, that's where I think checking in with ourselves to start, and then also getting our own therapy, I think, is really important if we're noticing that we're maybe stuck in something that we ourselves don't feel that we can get ourselves out of, if we know that we need to. So that's my 2 cents there.
Well, I appreciate, what Dave said is that, practicing some of these skills can, feel very new and sometimes even uncomfortable. And, I think that it's really important to recognize that when one person changes in the family system or in a relational system, there can be some adverse reaction to that, because those around you may have not been a part of that process. They may be unwilling or unable to engage with the new suit. And so again, I love, Brad, that you keep bringing up the mindfulness connection and the body connection, because our body speaks to us. And being able to be in tune with that can be so important. One thing I think can be really helpful is what I've used in my practice. It's called Take 5. And it can be kind of a fun activity that you can use, with your kids or your family, and an art project, sort of say, where everyone gets to make a Take 5 sign, like a stop sign. And it's this idea of being able to set healthy boundaries in relationships where you can tell another person that maybe comes into the room and a live event or something, and you're upset, or your kids are doing something, whatever the trigger is, that you get to identify, hey, I need to just take 5 minutes or 5 deep breaths or 5 seconds or 5 feet away. It's, again, giving this permission that, one, you're acting in self-love and recognizing when you need to have space, but you're also teaching the other people in your life that it's okay to set boundaries and that this is a healthy way of doing it. Again, recognizing that some of the childhood experiences can really impact your resistance window. And if that's closed and you're just feeling really overwhelmed, your ability to be resilient and use those skills might be a little strained. So just, again, taking that time to pause, to reflect, and just, again, give yourself permission that you might not even have the answer right in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this kind of ties back to what Brad was saying at the beginning about self-care. And when it comes to your self-care and your relationships, sometimes you have to communicate to your relationships, this is my self-care time, right? Or this is my self-care activity. Because I think for a lot of people, particularly those that are some of the warmest hearted people you'll ever meet, they're so caring and giving when their kids need something, their spouse, when others need something, it's their self-care that is kind of the first thing that gets taken, that they disregard for that. And I think it's important to kind of advocate for your self-care the way you might advocate for keeping your doctor appointment, keeping your dentist appointment, right? Like, this is something I need to be healthy and maintain my health. So we'll take care of that later. Let's reschedule, or, I think it's important you have to advocate for that to your relationships sometimes.
And I think also, too, recognizing that, when your resistance window is slammed shut and, you're feeling like you really are on this roller coaster, it can also really place you at risk for making unhealthy choices and decisions. For instance, retreating to the casino or a gambling activity for an escape, or substances or shopping or other, types of disordered behavior. So just kind of really being able to be in tune with when you've reached your limit, and then having those healthy coping tools to tap into, so that those behaviors that can be negative and pull you away from that self-love don't rise up.
This kind of makes me think, and this is live, this isn't pre-scripted or anything. This makes me think of safe and supportive matrix kind of thing I do, right? Like, there's people in your life that are safe and supportive, meaning they're safe to be with and be around, and they're supportive of whatever your goals are. Then there's people that are safe but not supportive. You can be around them, no problems, but they're not necessarily supportive of your goals, be it your goals to lose weight, your goals to go back to school, your goals to attend treatment or counseling or recovery from something. Then there's people who aren't safe to be around. Okay, maybe they're engaging in some behaviors that are triggering to you, but they're supportive. So if you tell them, hey, I want to quit smoking, they'll be like, awesome, that's fantastic. But maybe if they're still smoking, then you just don't go hang out on the smoke breaks at work, right? So it kind of helps you change, determine your boundaries. Oh, of course, and the last is unsafe and unsupportive, where you're going to need the most strict boundaries. And in a perfect world, it would be wonderful if all of our relationships were safe and supportive for everything. But that's just not how it works, right? And you can have a person who's safe and supportive for most everything in your life except that one thing, right? Like, I had a grandma, I love her, bless her, rest her soul, but not super safe or supportive on dieting, right? Grandma's house has candy and cookies and goodies, and didn't understand why certain food groups weren't health foods, right? So just, you got to use your judgment a little bit and kind of determine where is maybe some toxicity presenting itself in different relationships at different times, and sometimes relationships kind of go down the chute around Christmas time for whatever reason, right? Stress goes up, and who used to be safe and supportive isn't in December, so you got I think having that ability to say, okay, not everybody is the type of relationship I would want, but they are my friends and family, and I can lean on this person for support, and I can go have coffee with this person, and I can do this with that, and knowing what are the positive roles they do serve and what circumstances, I think can be really, really helpful. Let's see. Let's pull in a comment from Pat here. She says, many New Jersey folks getting into physical and emotional trouble with online gambling and sports betting, all legal now. Yes, thank you, Pat, for bringing that up, because we are seeing that kind of across the country. In Washington State, where we're at, sports betting is being legalized. Online gambling is still not legal at the moment, but across the country, both sports and online gambling are being legalized, and brings with it some pros and some costs, right? Particularly when maybe a go-to activity to forget about things or not have to think about things we're dealing with or being overwhelmed with or kind of numb out. Gambling is very effective at that. So for some people, this may turn into not just a recreation, but something that their brain now sees a solution to negative emotional states or financial problems, and sees it as an income, etc. All right. Let's see. Our next talking point here is, what is the relationship between, and we're excited for this one. What is the relationship between my physical body and emotional health? Who wants to start with that one?
I'll start. I think that this is really important, and Brad brought this up yesterday as well, about really recognizing that the body remembers the trauma. It does keep the score, in reference to the book title. That recognizing that the body, Creator gave us this body to listen to or not, but if we listen to it, it can tell us when we're in danger, when we're hot, when we're cold, when we need something. And when the emotional side of the body kicks in, sometimes those two things can intertwine. And so you may be experiencing, for instance, many women experience pain in their upper shoulders, their necks, and even their abdomen when they're under stress. And so being able to look at, okay, well, what's happening within the body? Doing some body scans and paying attention to, where is this coming from? It could come from historical trauma. It could come from childhood trauma. It could come from something that happened 2 weeks ago, but the body is still holding on to it. Being able to find ways to acknowledge it and to release it can be really important, rather than saying, oh, I just wish this would go away, because oftentimes the body will hold on to these things, and then the brain actually creates these pathways where, when this emotion, let's just say of fear, kicks in, and then you have a knot in your stomach. It's all interconnected. So being able to recognize that there is a relationship, rather than saying, well, what's wrong with me? Why is my back hurting all the time? Being in tune with what's going on in the moment. Again, Brad, as you said, it takes us back to mindfulness meditation. What is happening right now that's creating this?
Thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the things that we talk about in EMDR, which stands, by the way, for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is basically, so it's this idea, it's based on the idea that with normal non-traumatic memory, so something that doesn't overwhelm us, that REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, that phase of sleep will actually be able to naturally process things. So, you might have had a long day, this and that irritant has happened, and you just need to go to bed and typically wake up feeling, oh yeah, that bothered me yesterday, or maybe can't even remember it. Whereas with traumatic memories or things that are really upsetting in some way, which could range from a car accident, which we might say is a big T trauma, to small T traumas like being bullied or some kind of verbal abuse that we might have experienced. With those kind of traumas, now I'm losing my train of thought. That's so funny. Okay, let me come back around. Oh yeah. So with the REM sleep, right? So with those kind of traumas, REM sleep doesn't work. So we get stuck. So they can get stuck in our brain, and that's where the EM of EMDR, the eye movement part, where you're actually going in and manually processing these things that had gotten stuck, because your body, and in this case your brain, is holding on to it. And by doing the eye movements, you're actually engaging both the left and the right side of your body and other parts of your brain beyond just the thinking part of your brain, but your emotions and your physical body. And so you're able to clear that stuff out. And I know a lot of times people will have, what's wrong with me that I'm still bothered by this thing that happened to me 30 years ago? And what I try to help people understand is this has nothing to do with your character. This has nothing to do with who you are as a person. This is a physical way that this trauma has gotten stored and it's gotten stuck. And typically, and I believe in all cases, but typically traumas don't just resolve themselves. We can effectively suppress them. And one of the draws to gambling and some of these other addictive disorders is we really can feel that we're fine. Oh, that was in the past. I'm good. I'm not bothered by it. But we find out later when something similar happens, now we have this huge response to it. And that's our body and our brain's way of saying, hey, there's still work to be done here. There's still healing that needs to happen here. And so I think that's really important, to just have compassion towards ourselves and to get the treatment that we need to heal these things, and understand, again, that it's not about our character, and our brain is part of our bodies, and things do get stuck in our brains in a way where just trying to think about it in a different way is not going to do the trick, because it's kind of stuck. So I think this is a really great question. I wish I could say that I came up with it, but I did not. So thank you, Tana, and whoever else might have contributed. But yeah, it's really powerful.
Well, if I can just piggyback, Brad, off of what you just said, I really appreciate you, bringing up this idea that it's not a problem, a character problem that is happening within the person. And what I see is so many people being so hard on themselves because they may have been struggling getting past a certain situation or dealing with these repetitive memories or physical pains that are happening. And so that's one of the great things about having different therapeutic approaches to be able to heal this process, and then also to have some acceptance and understanding that it may never go away, but with learning effective tools and ways to manage them, then the impact becomes lessened in one's life. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and I'll add, there's a lot of therapy techniques that integrate body work into the therapy, but from a much, day-to-day purpose. When you're at home and you've just had an argument, right, and your heart rate is up and your blood pressure is up, it can be as simple as going to a separate room and doing some mindful breathing, or grabbing your dog and heading out for a walk. Getting the body engaged through breathing or exercise or movement or turning on some music and dancing. That is incredibly effective at changing our mood state. Right? It kind of comes back to the emotional regulation. It's just you're moving your body and engaging it in some way, be it lay down and take a nap, or take a hot shower, or I like to crochet. It's like a very repetitive hand movement, right? There's something about it that's very calming and very relaxing. And it's just up to the person what they like to do, and they can do it in the comfort of their own home and have multiple positive benefits from it. Anything else you guys wanted to add on that?
One of the things that, and I want to say, yes, EMDR is just my specialty. So that's the frame that I see things through. And it is important to acknowledge there are many very helpful therapeutic techniques. So I'm glad that was mentioned. And yeah, I mean, one of the things.
And thank you for kind of explaining to people what that is, because there may be a lot of people who have heard of it that didn't know, and now they've got a good understanding of that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. But one of the things that I often, because with that type of work, when we're processing through a trauma, and it's this idea that you're going to continue to process after the session because you're activating what's called this adaptive information processing within your brain. So your brain is connecting the dots in a different way, and so and one thing that's really helpful to metabolize it is the exercise, and it's a way to, and that's also in that book that you'd mentioned, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. That's one of the things he talks about, is there are lots of ways to metabolize trauma, therapy itself plus exercise, or even certain forms of exercise that can really help people to work through stuff. And there's actually some interesting information about say monks, for example, who've been through really terrible things, and in their lives, and they've been, say, moved, away from their home countries and that, and they've experienced so much trauma, but because of the meditation that they've done, intensive meditation, they have in that way healed their trauma. And we're talking many hours over many days and years. So there are a lot of ways to heal. But again, that's engaging the body. So much of, like, for example, Vipassana meditation is connecting with an experience of your breath. What are you feeling? And just connecting with the body sensations. And it can be quite simple, but it can also be very healing in ways that we might not anticipate. So there are a lot of roads that we're, looking at. This is a massive topic, actually, that link between the physical body and emotional health. And there are many paths to healing within it as well. So just wanted to add that little piece.
And I just wanted to kind of touch on, oh, and thank you, Rob. He just put the link in the chat for everyone for the book that has been referenced a couple times here. I just wanted to touch on, Dave said that being able to reframe past trauma has been part of recovery. And I think I'm really glad you said that, Dave, because I think that's a huge point, that recovery, say from substances or gambling or some other addictive disorder or such, isn't just about changing whatever the addiction was, right? It's so far beyond just that. There's healing. I mean, you're a person, and we're complex and we're complicated, and we are shaped by everything we think, by every relationship, by everything that happens to us. And in order to change our lives in a better way, and to make our lives what we want, often it does require us to look at and explore things that in early on we might not have even thought were related. And healing from the trauma is part of recovery, and addressing mental health issues is part of recovery, and addressing our sleep hygiene and our diet and exercise routine is part of our mental health and recovery, etc. Like, it all intertwines, right? Like, if you ever have a terrible night's sleep, and so then the next day you're drinking more caffeine than you normally would, you might be eating more junk food than you normally would, you might be grouchy, so you're talking, shorter with people than you might normally would, and then you feel bad because you said something you can't take back, and so then you eat a cookie, and then you don't go work out because you feel bad, and then it all connects to it's the other things that are going on. Might have accidentally self-disclosed that I might eat cookies when I feel bad about something I said, but anyway.
But that's where that mindfulness really comes in and is so important. I mean, it's a broken record, but it keeps being true. That's why it's a broken record. It's like, okay, so we can avoid that negative ripple effect. So then I do this, and then I feel crappy, so then I do this, and then this makes me feel worse, so then I do this. And then my child says this to me, and I overreact, and now I have to clean up that. And it's like, whoa, like if we could rewind, 10 or 15 minutes and say, this is if I'm checked in with what's going on, if we can go a different route and say, I'm going to take 5 minutes. I love that take 5. I'm going to take 5 minutes, or I'm going to take some space, or whatever it is, and take care of myself. We ultimately save ourselves a bunch of time, and even communicating that with others. I love you. And so I'm going to take this time to take care of myself, whether we're talking to a partner, a friend, a child. So it is so key and so important. And it is sometimes difficult. It's difficult to be aware of what's really happening within us and to trace it. I have sort of a self-care checklist in my head that'll pop up. It's like, okay, I don't feel good. Okay, now, first of all, it's okay not to feel good. Sometimes I don't accept that within myself. Then I go through and go, okay, what's happening? Did I get enough sleep? When did I eat last? Have I been drinking enough water? When's the last time that I connected with my friends? Am I, working too many hours a day? What's my, and usually somewhere along there, I'm like, oh, ding, found the thing. I'm going to stop and take care of this piece. So it takes practice, and I don't always do it perfectly. And often it seems like we're so complex, and really it's like, we just need a sandwich. That in my family, genetically, that seems to solve 90% of our problems. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that comes to mind for me is just giving ourselves time to think, right? That's where maybe creative writing can be helpful, or journaling, or gardening. But taking the earbuds out, turning the screens off, literally just giving ourselves time to think. I think a lot of times we're in a rush and our emotions are high or whatever, and we think, well, I don't have time for that. I need to do XYZ. But really, if you just stop and give yourself time to think, to make a plan for whatever it is you need to deal with, or the conversation you need to have, or the tasks you need to complete, or the errands run, etc. Giving yourself just a little bit of time to have mindful thinking, right? Rather than just winging it, flying by the seat of your pants, whatever it is that's presenting as the immediate issue is what gets your attention, right? By being able to do that, like you said, ultimately it actually saves you time and stress, and gives yourself that moment to lower the blood pressure, slow down the heart rate, think things through, engage this part of the brain. And now I can act because I have a chosen response rather than an instinctive reaction. Right? I'm going to respond to it because I've thought it through. This is how I want to respond to this situation, rather than I'm going to react by screaming and slamming the door, going here, there, or everywhere, whatever it is, because that's the first thing that came to mind.
I think having this approach can also be really liberating to a person who maybe has really struggled with experiencing the emotions and following through with a plan that focuses on self-love. I'd like to think of self-care as self-love. It's a space where you can actually stop and say, hey, I'm worthy enough to stop what's going on and take a different route. And if you lived your life really living in that fight or flight mode, this definitely is a different approach. And so I appreciate Dave saying that it's a new suit, because it really can be a new language that you're learning of positive self-talk and giving yourself permission and approval that it's okay to feel these feelings. It's okay to experience them, and it's okay to figure out what do you need to live a healthy, balanced life.
Absolutely. And sometimes what you need to live a healthy, balanced life requires some input from other people, which you'll need to ask for help for, right? Nobody's a mind reader. Even though they might know you better than anyone else on this planet, they're still not a mind reader, right? So whether you're asking for help from a family member or friend, or seeking help from a professional, sometimes that's just what you need. We're humans. We're not meant to live in isolation and alone and deal with things by ourselves. But you might not get the help you need if you don't ask for it. And it takes strength to do that.
I always tell people that, asking for help or seeking support is really courageous. And it's really one of the first steps of self-love. I think it's also important to recognize that, culturally, many cultures have really kind of pushed against Western medicine and kind of the psychology field and the counseling field. And so making sure that, as providers, that the asking for help also supports that cultural connection that people may need. So sometimes even asking for help means going to an elder, going to a spiritual connection, going to a sweat, these different types of things. Help doesn't necessarily need to happen within the home. It can even happen outside. And I think that creating spaces of safety for people to do that is really important.
And I like to think of it, just to kind of dovetail on that, I like to think of asking for help in the same way that you think of like a professional athlete. I think, for example, of someone like Michael Jordan, and you think, this guy, I mean, arguably the best basketball player of all time. And you say, okay, how many coaches does Michael Jordan have? How many people does he have on his team? If you think of trainers, assistant coaches, I mean, he's got a ton of people supporting him to be at his best. And then you think of like a rec league player. They might have one coach. They likely, someone who isn't in a league at all just goes out and shoots. And so that's how I've come to conceptualize asking for help and getting support, is it's actually a sign that you are at a higher level as opposed to it being a weakness. And so, and for me professionally, I do the same thing. I have a lot of people who I work with who are my consultants. I'm a consultant for others, but I have my own consultants, and I frame it in that way of like, okay, where do I want to be? And I have my own therapist, because where do I want to be? And so reframing that, I think in this field, there can be so much shame about asking for help. There's sort of this, mainstream cultural view of, oh, it's this like rugged individualism, and this almost, it's distorted. And so people feel that there's something wrong with them if they ask for help, when really, if you look at the folks who are most successful, nobody is doing this by themselves. Nobody is. Then the higher level you get, the more people you need to support you. And you look even within any kind of big organization. If you could look at a tribal chairman, you could look at the CEO of a company, right? The higher they get, the more support they need around them. And yet when it comes to asking for help, we can kind of get things flipped around in our heads a little bit. So that's just how I've kind of come to see it. And I've really noticed that in people who I've worked with, who've been my clients, the more therapy that they've gotten, the healthier that they are in general. And the less that people have gotten, kind of like the less coaching for a basketball player that they would get, the less good at basketball they are, right? And it's just kind of makes sense, because we're not supposed to go through life alone. We're social creatures. The more support we can get, the better. And I always encourage people to take advantage of that wherever it may come, not only in therapy, But in any looking around in your life and just seeing who might be your natural resources, your natural supports, and leaning on them if they're willing to step up for you.
I really, really like that analogy, Brad. I mean, if it helps to frame it as, instead of asking for help, if there's some sort of, history there with the person, right? If instead you're framing it as, I'm asking for coaching, I'm asking for mentoring, because I want to be my best self and to continue to learn and grow and pull on the experience and input from other people. I think that's a really good way to look at it. And to me, I think, asking for help is just part of being human, right? It might be me asking you for help today, and it's you asking me for help with something else tomorrow, right? Yeah, I'll help you out today. And guess what? I'm probably going to need you to help me out later. Just how we work, right? I think sometimes a lot of stigma comes with asking for professional help, right? From a counselor or therapist, from kind of a mindset of, there's something in me that needs to be fixed, or there's something in me that's broken. And kind of like you were saying earlier, like, there's nothing wrong with your character, right? We're just human. Life happens to all of us. That's just what your reality is, can be best served by someone who has the training experience for that specific thing, right? Which is where a family member or friend, great for love, conversation, support, etc., but they're limited in some things, like dealing with resolving childhood trauma, etc., right? They're not trained for that, so they're not going to be as helpful. They can be supportive and encouraging, etc., and then there's things that a professional can do that they can't. So,
and also kind of just recognizing that, rather than thinking of it as there's something wrong with you, thinking of it as really it's a place of being very insightful and in tune with what's going on in your life. And that because you want to be your best self, that there's ways of kind of getting outside of your circle and getting more of an unbiased support system. Can, again, really be liberating and create more of a sense of freedom from these things that may be holding you down.
Yeah, an unbiased support system that isn't emotionally connected. Yeah, this is where things like support groups or treatment groups are so incredibly unique. You're not going to get that kind of a dynamic from work friends or from your family dinner. When people are in a support group or a treatment group together and they can connect on some of these deep issues, there's this thing I call the stones and boulders, right? And the stones are like, getting out of bed on time, getting to work on time, doing your tasks. Not fun, but you got to do them, and they're only your responsibility. And then boulders are the mental health, the recovery, the medical diagnosis, the car accident, the big things we're really not designed to do alone. When you're in groups like that, the support groups, the treatment groups, and a person has one of those super strong, vulnerable moments and says, this is something I've struggled with, you'll see other people in the room go, oh, right? It's like physical reaction to an invisible weight lifted off their shoulders because, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
They get it. They get it. And that's where, like, it's just amazing. It's just really incredible.
Well, it's that it creates hope, right? That if other people may have experienced some of the same journey and they can create change, then so can we.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also where it's nice for people to share, people who are maybe further along in their life goals of recovery or managing their depression or anxiety or addiction or whatever, for someone early on who's looking for that hope, to be able to see that and be like, oh, okay, life can be better. This is the new thing I haven't tried yet, right? So let's do this.
And it nails the shame, just takes the shame, I'm not good enough, and it just gives it a body slam. You know, if you think of that, like someone sharing about your experience that you were afraid to share because of the fear of shame that is a natural human thing, and then someone shares it, and that is that weight, right? Just to be known, to be okay. Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. You're okay. I'm okay.
Yeah.
That is such a beautiful gift that we can give to each other.
Yeah. I'm not perfect, and I'm still okay.
Mm-hmm. In DBT, one of the things they talk about, dialectical behavior therapy, they talk about this dialectic that says, I'm already enough, and there are things that I want to change about myself. And I would almost say, like, change it slightly to say, because I am already enough, I am worth being my best self. I'm worth making these little tweaks to myself and improving myself and getting help to truly be my best self. But my value was never in question. I've always been good enough, and there are a few things for me to work on. I love that way of thinking about asking for help, because it says, because I'm worthy, therefore I'm going to do what I need to do to be my best self.
Like the pro athlete who surrounds themselves with a team of people to help them get there. I like it. I like it. So before we let everybody go, I just want to remind everyone we've already got on the blog for this page resources, including a variety of helplines and websites. And we just dropped an episode of the podcast yesterday. So for those of you who tune into that, there's a new episode to listen to. Janai and Brad, is there anything else you wanted to share as we close out? Any other last thoughts?
Well, that you're worthy, and getting on the journey of self-care and self-love can be an amazing one, and it can create change, and it can increase your desire to live a meaningful life.
And this has been the highlight of my day. So thank you so much for just your connections, and it's been great with you, Tana and Janai, and I'm feeling reinvigorated and inspired for my afternoon. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Excellent. Well, thank you for taking the time to come on. And to anyone that might have missed getting to watch live, you can watch on demand anytime you want, Facebook or YouTube. It'll be there for you. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And for those of you watching after it's live, I hope you've enjoyed it and gotten a lot out of it. And the resources are still online for you. So thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.